I chose this book because it's of very topical interest. I don't read anything to do with economics usually because it's something which I don't understand very well. But it's very topical because inflation, I think, is something which everyone is talking about. And the book is written by a guy called Rupert Russell. It's not too much, it's just 275 odd pages in quite bold print. So this guy, interestingly, is a sociologist, and he watched a couple of events which really shook him, and it made him wonder what is happening really. So one was the Brexit, and he thought it was just stupid. Another was Trump coming to the power, and he seems absolutely ridiculous, and just made him think. And the rest of the book actually is about that journey where he goes around the world, 5 continents, 20 countries, just to figure out what's happening. He's trying to trace the path. Now, what's interesting about this book, and what is also the biggest critique of the book, is that it provides very simplistic kind of answers, and it doesn't provide very, I would say, a macroeconomic solution or macroeconomic supported theories about what happened. So I would actually dive into that right away, but with a caveat that I'm not a macroeconomist or I'm not a sociologist. So what he talks about is 2-3 theories I'll quickly just talk about. I was having a lot of butterflies while coming into the stage. So one is, of course, the butterfly theory, chaos theory. He talks about a guy called Edward Lorenz, who was a climatologist at MIT. And he talks about, that's the 1961, I think, mathematician. First time he's making he's trying to do a weather pattern prediction. And he's got a computer called MacBee or something. And he finds that the results have gone completely awry. And those are the days when he had to round off the data which was going, and there was a feedback loop because the small rounding, it was just getting magnified. So that's where he started saying that if a seagull flaps its wing in Brazil, there is a tornado in Texas, and he wanted to take this theory to a wider audience, and people advised him that butterfly is the most sensitive creatures to talk about butterfly. So then he said butterfly flapping the wing in Brazil is causing a tornado in Texas. So that's the first theory he talks about, chaos theories. He's the modern founder of chaos theory. The second thing he talks about is really edge of chaos. So he talks about basically that water, you start boiling water, just the opposite of what happens to a frog in a boiling water. He says, till about 97, 98 degrees, nothing happens. You can't see anything on the surface, and suddenly something happens. So there's an edge of chaos. At that point of time, he calls it basically social thermodynamics. He says societies also have a boiling point. So these are the 2 theories which he nicely propounds in the book. Then he goes on to talk about, and I'm actually going to be telling about this in a slightly linear order. He has, of course, wrapped it around very beautifully, going back and forth, but maybe the engineer's brain, try to always straighten everything out. So he talks about Chicago, and Chicago was one of the biggest grain mandi in mid-19th century. He talks about basically just like what is happening, what you must have heard about, a lot of people coming with sack full of potatoes and etc. recently in UP and other places, and actually throwing away the crop and even onions also throwing away the crop because there's just too much of it. It used to happen, and then there came of somebody actually saying that how do we let's say store it somewhere and sell it during the lean period when there is no production. That's how he explains how the derivatives came into being, because there was a contract written, there's somebody who was actually underwriting it, there was a risk premium, and there were futures because there was the price which was linked to the future. So it's I don't know, I mean I must be in my own words, so if I'm sounding very abstract, please just let me know. So that's how it came into being. Over time, as happens in any trading, speculation got into it, and it became really bad, and it drove up the prices of wheat, etc., to astronomical level. And this carried on till about Great Depressions, 1929. Then Roosevelt actually came and he had that famous Glass-Steagall Act of Banking, 1933. He regulated everything, and this is basically going against the grain of what Hayek and Friedman have been saying: free markets, etc., etc. So that's the origin of this entire thing. Cut to 1998. This very famous gentleman called Alan Greenspan. Everyone has heard about him. This is prior to his Fed role, and he argues that commodity trading is still risky, but financial derivative trading is not risky at all. How can anyone bet on, let's say, financial futures or etc., etc.? So he argued for repealing of that act, which was set up in 1933. So that act was gone. So now you have very interesting futures, financial futures, which were formed, and essentially it was some commodity futures which came into being. Now what happened? There are US, and most of the book is actually focused in US, or it pertains to what happened in Western societies. It basically explains all the ills in the Western societies. So then he describes very beautifully, says that universities like Harvard, etc., they sit on an endowment fund of something like 36 billion or something. They invest. Pension funds, so they also invest. They don't get returns. They have very huge base, but they don't know where to invest money. So they are always looking for investments. 1990s, there was egg bubble, and when that busted, a lot of them actually lost money because they had invested in stocks. So they said, we don't understand stocks, so let's invest in something else. So they shifted to commodities. And that's how a lot of money actually flew to commodities, and prices of commodities started going up. And when there was also, as I mentioned, there were also very interesting credit derivative product also which came into being. And one of them, very popularly known, was mortgage insurance derivatives. Securitization. Yeah, securitization, absolutely. So because of that, they were, if there was a bank which was giving money for buying a house or something, it basically got that mortgage insurance product, and at a certain price, and it was quite kosher for them. At some point of time, what happened actually, that prices went up, the house prices went up, the risk went down, supposedly, around these derivative products, and as a result, what happened? That derivative prices started coming down, more and more derivatives started coming into the being, and one day when the housing market collapsed, the price, these also collapsed, and as a result, what happened? A lot of people went out of business, and I'm sure you heard of Lehman, and you heard of AIG, which actually broke right in the middle, and many others. So all these guys, big funds, then they started investing in commodities. That's how they started, driving up the price of commodities. So Lehman crisis is something which is very well known. I'm sure a lot of you have seen that movie called Big Short or something. But this 2010 is where the commodity prices were actually at the peak. And commodities basically what? Let's say very simple things like wheat, etc. And that was also the year there was bumper crop. So there was no shortage of food grain, there was no shortage of oil, but the prices were at the peak. And that's where this happened, that especially in Middle East, where there's a contract, there's a social contract between the government and the subjects, of providing a bread. And the bread prices went up. The prices of wheat went up. And it started in a place called Tunisia, where a guy actually self-immolated him. And soon that spark went to different countries like Egypt, Libya, and Syria, etc., and it just spread like wildfire. And then soon you had entire Arab Spring. So this is how all the events are so beautifully connected, and then this finally leads to the formation of ISIS. I won't go into the detail; it will take another 30 minutes. And at some point of time in around 2014 or so, when ISIS actually moves into Mosul, there's some static, some noise is there, and there are very smart traders who drive up the price of oil. And it's a foregone conclusion that if ISIS is going to occupy a particular oil well, it won't actually destroy it, it would rather sell it. But for whatever reason, the Wall Street, the way it behaves, the prices started going up. And when the prices went up, whatever happened to ISIS, everyone knows. I mean, they grew and grew and grew till they destroyed themselves. But a lot of money went to Saudi. Okay, a lot of money went to oil-rich nations like Saudi and Kuwait, etc., etc. But very interesting example is Saudi. And when a lot of money went to them, then what happened that they wanted to use that money and park that money elsewhere. And what better asset than real estate, and what better country or what better city in the world as London. So London real estate went up through the roof, and which basically led to this Brexit. Why? Because when the real estate goes up, if you bought it, you fine. If you've not bought it, and it goes beyond your reach, it actually alienates you. So it was really Farage versus Cameron and Brexit. Rest of it, you know what happened. The second event, what happened, which was exploited very beautifully by Trump, was that Saudis also set up a fund called Vision Fund, 60 billion. Put a lot of money in Bay Area, in tech companies. That money was used for buying very swanky condominiums, and it spread to East Coast, West Coast, wherever. But the Midwest was completely neglected. As a result, what happened? Which was traditionally a Democrat household, Democrat constituency, actually became a Republican, and that's how Trump. The book is just delightful. It goes on to talk about, the Russia-Ukraine war and many other things. It talks about climate activism. It talks about everything. Last, I'll just leave you with a couple of thoughts on this. Viral Acharya, everyone must have heard of him, has recently talked about this in a very famous Brookings paper. It's some 20 odd pages. If any one of you has an interest, you must read that. He talks about Big Five of India trying to corner the price. There's a guy called Albert Edwards. He works at SocGen, and he's written a paper about greedflation. And these are very interesting, correlation to this entire pricing. And if you find time, you must read it. I'm sorry, I took a lot of time. Thanks for being patient this year.